Welcome to Let's Talk About Love Stories from Everywhere. I'm your host, Jill Ferguson, and today with me is Kate Peters of Vocal Impact. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your company, Vocal Impact. What does it do?
Okay, well, I'm actually sort of dissolving that company and
Oh,
moving into a new one. I now have a company called the Human Voice Initiative.
okay.
The focus is more on voice. Vocal Impact was much more focused on consulting,
Mhm.
and for corporations, which I did a lot of that. And now, Human Voice Initiative is more focused on what I'm doing with my new book, which is about helping people find their voices. So it's a culmination of the work that I've done. I'll still be doing workshops. I'll still be consulting with people and doing that, but just a slightly different focus.
So will you still do corporate work or no? You're
Yes,
okay.
if they want me, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure,
So
yeah,
you mentioned your new book, but so your original book is this,
yes.
right? Can you hear me now? And tell me a little bit about this book. Ah,
Well, it really is sort of a workbook. It
mhm.
was I wrote it 20 years ago or so, and I was just really formulating my ideas around what it takes to communicate effectively. And as a person who came from the arts, and particularly in vocal performance, as well as I play the violin, and you spend a lot of time in a practice room, and that's how you get better. And so the book was designed with that in mind, not that people would go into a practice room, but that they would think about these things. What does it take to have influence, to have impact? I said 31 days is what
Mhm.
it took for this kind of practice, because I think you have to first of all learn what those skills are that you need, and then apply them on a regular basis and observe yourself and say, am I doing this or not? And that's behavior modification, right? You're looking to change your behavior, to develop your skills, to develop, say, muscles, reflexes, and the way you think about it. It's all gonna change if you want it to improve or change in any direction that it's not going in today. And so the book was built with that in mind. There's a lot of pages where you can write things in and observe. And the 31 days is, my thought was, you open the book, and that was 20 years ago. Now you just have it up on your screen, but you open it up, put it on your desk, and in the morning, observe, how's my voice feel today? And then at lunchtime, another quick note, and at the end of the day, another quick note. And in that process, you actually can observe change and see what your behavior really is, and make a difference. So that was the purpose of that book.
I think that that's something people don't think about, right? Is that some people wake up in the morning and their throat's scratchy, or after they've had, let's say, coffee with some dairy in it or something,
Mhm.
they get a little,
Right. Yeah.
right? And so our voices change throughout the day. They change as we warm them up.
Right.
They change depending on the weather, the
Mhm.
humidity, all of those things.
Yeah.
And I don't think when people think about like how, if I'm going to public speak or if I'm speaking in a small group, how to be more effective, they don't necessarily think about the mechanics.
That is
of the-
true. I think, really, I think most people don't think about their voices
Yeah,
at all. They
yeah.
just take them for granted. Jill, I've had more people say to me, "Oh, well, I would love to sing, but I could never sing." Well, why not? Because I don't have that kind of voice. Or I can sing, but I hate it, and it'll never be different. Why not? Well, because it's just the way my voice is. But voices are trainable. I thank God they're trainable, because I spend a lot of money on that. But but voices are trainable, just like the rest of your body. You can work out, you can develop muscles, your biceps can get stronger, you can get more stamina. And with your voice, you can work on your voice and it will change too. And depending on how you work with it, just like the other muscles, you can do damage or you can make it improve. But it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and you, whether your voice is coming from your diaphragm or coming from your vocal cords, right? Or
Right.
it determines where there's going to be strain.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And even how you think about it. That's why in both books I talk about intention, which I think is one of the most important things that
Mhm.
that we can consider when it comes to communication or living our lives. And although I hadn't really put it all together at that time, the idea of alignment, which is what I talk about now, it was in there. It was the intention and thinking about intention, and then thinking about the application of your voice and how you use it, and strengthening it, and then also what is the content you're talking about. So it's all there. It's just in a much more a much less developed form.
So you're using the word intention, but would you define that for us? Just because some people have, one definition of it and others have another slightly different variation.
Sure. My my definition of intention is an aim that guides action, and that was my original one. And now I call it purpose with a plan.
Okay.
Many people think about intention as purpose, like that's synonymous, but it actually isn't. If you look even at the dictionary and you look at intention, it's purpose with a plan. So you have to think about not just what I want to accomplish, but how am I going to get there?
And that's so important, right? Because I think that sometimes the word has been hijacked to have kind of an airy fairy meaning of it. All I have to do is think about it, right? And it's
Right.
not. That's not having a plan, and
That is
yeah,
exactly right. And
and that's barely having a purpose.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. But a lot of people think of intention as being something that you wish for, that you hope for. And in fact, I had a client once who hated the word intention. She would not use it, no matter what I talked about. I would use it, and she would say, "No, no, no. Goal, purpose, anything like, but intention." And it's because she thought it was just hopeful,
Yeah.
that it wasn't really something. And eventually, she learned that she could accept that word when she started practicing yoga, of all
Ah.
things, right? Because
Yes.
when you practice yoga, you stand at the front of your mat and you say, "What's my intention?" Or your teacher asks, "What's your intention for the practice?" And that's something you focus on to get through the practice. And you focus on it all the time to meet that purpose. And your plan is that practice that day.
And it's I love that you mentioned yoga with this because yoga is a practice,
Yeah.
right? And what you're talking about of and you kept saying the 31 days, and that comes from the subtitle of the book, which was harnessing the power of your vocal impact in 31 days. But that to do that is a practice too.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
it's not a read the book, do the exercises, and you're done kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And that's also coming out of my musical background, is that I'm well aware that you don't just think about being a violinist, you have to actually apply it, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, your musical background, because that's how you started with this work. And
Yeah, unbeknownst to me, that's how I started. It snuck up on me. But yeah, so I started playing the violin when I was about 7. And within a couple of years, I was playing in a youth orchestra. I lived in Phoenix, and I absolutely adored the violin. I was one of those kids. You didn't have to pull me in from outside to practice. I would just go practice. I loved it. Musical geek, I guess. But I remember that first day when I saw the violin that my parents had bought for me, and I looked at it and I thought, I can make music with that. I can make sound out of that. I know I can. And I picked it up and scratched away at it. And my cat at the time yelled at me, but I knew I could, and so I had a love affair with music from early on, and I sang and went on and sang in college and developed a career in voice. I did a little detour in psychology in school, and then I went on to get a Master of Music degree. And so I had skills that I didn't even know I had. You know, artists have to figure out how to work with an audience. They have to understand how to communicate what they're trying to communicate. Singers, in particular, work on their voices all the time, how they stand. I remember being in a class in college where I had to walk across the stage, and then my stage director made fun of the way I was walking, because I was walking in a very trendy way at the time, you know, trying to be very trendy, and it was not the right thing at all. So that's what I mean. You have to learn how to do these things. And so years later, when I began thinking about working with business people, I thought about that because I began observing that I knew things they didn't know and that they needed. And so that musical training and the experience that I had with it really fed into this whole approach that I take with communication.
And how did you land your first client with that?
Um, my first client came through my husband,
Okay.
who had observed me working. I taught voice for years for singing, and he observed me working with them. And then he had a client who had lost his voice. He was trying to sell his company, a big company, and he was talking to analysts and all day long he was talking. And he'd go home at night, and he couldn't talk to his family. His voice was blown out. So what we call vocal fatigue. He had a major case of that. And so his family was it was causing problems. Let's just say that. And so Doug said, could you work with him? Could you help him with his voice? And well, I've been doing that a lot with people, and I had done it with business people before, but always with people who wanted to sing also. And I thought, okay, well, let me try it. And it worked. It worked well for him. And in the process of working with him, of course, I had him saying things, reading things, doing his talks and that kind of thing, which I treated more like repertoire, a singer's repertoire, right? If you can sing something, then you can speak, you're an actor, whatever. So I observed things like, why doesn't he stand up straight? You know, why is he standing on one foot? Why is he pacing around the room? What is this? And I realized that he hadn't been taught to do it any other way. He had taken communication classes, plenty of them. Most business people have taken at least one at some point in their career, if they get up enough in their career. And so, but he hadn't really taken it in. You know, a lot of those workshops you take for a day and then you're supposed to get it. Just like you say, with practice is what makes it happen. And you're not given that practice, or not given the observation people have to see what you're doing and give you feedback on it. So that's how it started. I started working with him, and then working with some others, and then was kind of fun. I started a blog early on when blogs were first happening. And I just thought it was fun. I thought it sounded crazy. You know, it's like having a diary online, and would people find it or not? Who knows, you know, at that time. And so I started a blog, and somebody found me out of the blue, and then told me that where they found me was on another blog that listed me as one of the top vocal, what is it? Not vocal, but a speech, you know, public speaking. The top public speaking blogs. And I'm thinking, I am? I didn't know that. Those are the days. So it was the frontier of blogging, you know. And so then he said, I have a senior vice president up here in Silicon Valley who really needs some help. And I got up there, and then he referred me to people, it's that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So, yeah.
It's like the old Breck shampoo commercials.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the best way for us to get clients too, I think, because it's
Oh, yeah.
really the word of mouth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so then at what point were you like, oh, wait, I have a business doing
Oh,
this?
pretty much right away. I mean, I always considered I had a business, and it was me for a long time, as a performer,
Yeah.
as a voice teacher and all of that.
Mhm.
So it was just really branching off in a new direction.
And so when you talk about being a performer, you've done acting and
Mhm.
you have, I think you're a member of SAG-AFTRA.
Yep,
AFTRA, right?
SAG-AFTRA
Yeah.
and equity. Yeah.
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 And are you still doing any of that? Or
I not so much. I am still performing. I'm still singing and performing. Not as much as I did, and mostly local. We do home concerts and concerts in the community. I may do more of that. I've been busy writing, so I haven't put much energy into that lately. But certainly for a long time, I did that. Yeah.
and you mentioned writing. What's the name of the new book?
It's called Reverberate, the
Okay.
art of finding your voice in a noisy world.
What a great and Lord knows this world is very noisy.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
when is the book coming out? Do you have a publication date that you know?
I don't have a specific date, but I'm shooting for March of
Okay.
this year. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And what do you hope that book? I mean, what do you hope the book does? What's your intention for the book?
Okay, good. My intention for the book is to help leaders to understand that their communication is influential not because of force, but because of an alignment with the three areas of intention, story, and presence, and that creates connection, which is the real power in influence. So that's a kind of in a nutshell, but that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm basing it on my years of working with people, also my musical background, and how all of that has informed that approach that I take.
So when you're talking about story has been such a big thing, right? Especially with social media and the founding of companies, all think they have to have this like either heartwarming or sexy story
Mhm.
that they're selling people, whether it's genuine or disingenuine, doesn't seem to matter sometimes.
Right.
But how do you help people cut through that noise of
So
telling a
first,
story that matters?
right. So first of all, my approach to story is a little different because I call it story with a capital S. And what I mean by that is that it's not just telling stories, it's using communication or the words, the content that actually connects with people. And that could be something like small talk. Small talk, or what we call phatic communication, is something that we developed eons ago as humans to test out whether or not the person is friend or foe. And so it does have a place in our world. Many people say, oh, that's just small talk, or I don't like small talk, but it has a place. And for example, you and I, when we first got on this call, did a little chit chat, and that helped us to just kind of focus in on this moment. I think that's hugely important in almost all situations. And what I call, if you want to have an important conversation or a conversation that matters, or if you want to give a talk to people, and you can't just start out with a talk. It's helpful to connect with people, see where they're coming from. You can do that by going out into the audience and talking to them ahead of time, and then referring back to some of those moments when you get up and talk. But the idea is connection. So, story with a capital S is communication that connects. And it could also be emotional use of sound when you speak. Many people speak with a very flat tone. And if you can learn to add inflection to that, you'll have more connected communication. And partly because in English, we need inflection to actually understand what another person is saying. We rely on that. Languages rely on that or a lot of words. It's one or the other, inflection or a lot of words to create meaning. And in English, it's more inflection than words.
And with inflection, you are talking about intentional inflection as opposed to, women traditionally have had this habit of raising their voice at the end of sentences like everything's a question, even though it isn't.
Right, right.
Especially if they're in a room full of men and it's a business setting.
Yes.
And so if you study male-female communication patterns, right, and all the
Yep,
work that's been done on that with
that's right. Now that's
Japan and
interesting.
everybody.
That's really interesting because I love the idea of understanding what is relational communication and what isn't. And women tend to be more relational in their communication, which is why they do what a lot of business people call upspeak. So at the end, as you're talking about, we go up like a question. But what we're really doing is inviting someone else into that conversation. So some of that is really important. And I've known a lot of people who just want to cut it all out. And as soon as you cut all of that upspeak out, you start to sound dogmatic, which is not the objective. What we want is a nice balance of the two. So yes, I think being intentional about inflection is important. That it's being intentional about everything is important, frankly. When you really want to have an impact, when you really want to connect with people, then the more intentional you are, the better, because otherwise we've developed all of these habits over the years. Human beings learn to communicate by imitating others. And that's how we learn. We are not born with the ability to use language. We have to learn language. We're not born with a vocabulary of any kind. And so we can say, yeah, I know. But most animals are. Most animals have a vocabulary that they use right away. We don't. So it takes 2 years to learn to speak. How do you learn to speak? You listen to your parents, you listen to your teachers, you listen to the television, you listen to, podcasts, wherever you're listening to people, you're actually picking up what they're doing and imitating, at least for those first 2 years. Now, I would submit that many people listen all the time. We have popular ways of saying things and we seem to adapt them, right? That's why things change over time. And when we listen to old movies, we think, gosh, they're speaking in kind of a strange way, but that's what was popular at the time. So I think that it's important to know that if you started your life imitating and developing your voice, you can do it again. You can change it. You can do something else with it later on if you want to. Just like anything else, it may take more time as you get older, but you can. And it's also important to know that you've created your voice. You are that voice that you've created. Even if you've imitated other people, it's your creation. I think that's really important.
It is. And it's also, it explains why you can take any baby of any ethnicity and put it anywhere in the world, right? And it'll learn to speak whatever language is around.
Yeah. Right.
And so, I think it's the same thing about the way, at least I've been told by a chiropractor, it's the same thing about the way we learn to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Like if your parents walk with their feet prone outward, then you tend to do the same thing. And it's not genetics. It's actually because this is what you've seen.
Yeah, sure.
And so if your family uses certain words that may not be the norm, you may adapt and use those certain words
Yeah.
and sound a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's exactly right. Um, and and so again, that uniqueness that we have, on the one hand, it sounds like, well, I just copied everybody, so what's unique about it? No, it's still your creation.
Mhm.
And that, I think, is important because everybody has a voice. Everybody has a voice. Now, as my husband sometimes says to me, well, everyone has a voice, but you think you have something to say. That's true. That's true.
Is he being nice when he says that or not?
Well, he is. I think he's being surprised because he doesn't always feel that way. Not everyone does feel like they want to get up in front of people and say something or sing something. But that's something I've done since I was a little kid. So yeah,
Yeah. So it's as natural to you as
yeah,
breathing,
mhm,
basically. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I grew up singing too, like you did, and singing in front of large groups of people. And
right.
so it was much more natural for me to do that than it was to speak in front of people for the longest
Yeah,
time.
yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Um, and, I guess there's people that would say, well, they're the same thing, but it's like, no, it's not really.
No, not really.
It
I
doesn't
mean,
feel the same.
I learned when I sang, I learned a method called speech level singing, and it is based on the spoken sound and the way we produce our voices when we speak. But ultimately, singing is speaking in pitch on pitches, and so it's more controlled, more prescribed, if you will.
Which also explains why you have some professional singers, right, or pop performers, for example, that sound one way when they speak. They have a certain accent from wherever they're from, and then when they're singing, that accent's not there.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing when it comes to to the voice. How we think about it and how it actually comes across can be different things.
But it just shows that it's way more complicated than most people think about it,
Oh, yeah.
right? Yeah,
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 it is. And I think when people start to explore developing their voice, they are surprised at what it takes to do that. Many people are surprised. I think people are mostly surprised at how much attention it takes to develop that. But it's just like I said, it's the same as any other muscles. You don't go to the gym twice and have it all figured out.
yeah. So you have, since we're kind of in the middle of cold and flu season, you have one of the blogs that you've written, or one of the things that you call K with a eight voice, right?
Yeah.
Is your newsletter.
Yep.
Quick remedies for voice malfunction.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and could you share a few of those for people that maybe, you know,
Sure.
fighting a cold or having an issue or some laryngitis or whatever?
So one of the um, first things that a lot of people do when they have laryngitis is gargle, and I would say do not gargle.
Okay.
And the reason you don't gargle is because all those germs that are in your head and in your mouth, for example, if you have a cold, may not actually be down on your vocal folds. And as soon as you gargle, you're bringing them all down onto the vocal folds. So I would say do not gargle. Um, don't drink iced liquids if you have a sore throat or if you have laryngitis, because iced liquids will constrict the vessels where you want them to be open and healing. So that would be another important thing which people don't always understand. And another is that uh, I always think about football season and people screaming and yelling. Mostly what I advise is don't scream. Don't scream. It's not good for you. If you must scream and you can't help it, at least try not to do it for a long period of time. That's it does a lot of damage to your voice. And if you have done that, then we used to recommend complete rest of the voice until it's better. And now we're recommending that you don't use your voice a lot right at first, but that you gradually get back into it and using it. When you do start to use your voice, the tendency is that the low pitches, they're very seductive, right? We love that low pitch. And some people go, oh, wow, I finally have a really sexy voice. But that probably is one of the worst things you can do. I tell people it's like if you were running and you were running all day long, you're eventually, those big muscles are going to get tired. And that's what you're doing with that low part of your voice. You're using a much larger part of your vocal folds. So the idea is to raise your voice a little bit until it feels more comfortable. So right now I'm speaking at this point, which is a little bit low for me, but if I were to just raise it up just a little bit and add a little bit more air to it, even if it sounds kind of fakey poo at first, it will heal your voice a lot more easily.
Well, that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
those are things. So you said no cold beverages, but are hot beverages, or should it be warm?
Um, Warm or hot is fine.
Warm
I
or hot
mean,
is fine.
you're not going
Okay.
to get it too hot because you won't be able to drink it. So I think it's
Well,
fine.
and what about, you get the old wives' philosophy, right, of honey and lemon, and you get some people say tea, and does it matter what the warm beverage is?
I don't think it matters too much. I mean, I'm not a nutritionist or a
Mhm.
doctor, but I think the thing to be aware of is if you have a sensitivity to something that tends to make you have to clear your throat a lot,
Mhm.
some people might have a sensitivity to the lemon, then don't use it.
Yeah.
If honey is some problem or sugar or something, then don't use it. And instead, use whatever works for you. Warm tea is fine. Yeah.
You also have one other blog I wanted to ask you about, or one other newsletter called "How to Find Meaning in Thank You," and this one's about intention. Because we just came through Thanksgiving and Christmas, and some
Yeah.
people were writing thank you cards, and I feel like sometimes, at least in the household I grew up with, and my grandparents expected handwritten thank you cards, which is a
Yeah.
lost art form, I think. Um, but
Yeah.
how do we find beyond the, like, I'm fulfilling an expectation and I'm just saying thanks? How do we find meaning in that?
I wrote that blog post because we had just been involved in some kind of fundraiser, and I felt like the thanks was not thanks. It was obligatory,
Mhm.
and so I thought, what would have made that better? And it's all about intention. So if your intention is to simply thank someone because your grandmother expects it, then frankly, that's how it's going to come across. And if your intention, though, is to really be grateful, to demonstrate the gratitude, then it's going to come off in a different way. You'll probably say something. You say, how could I express how thankful I am? Often it's going to be through talking about it more or expressing it more. Not just thanks for the red sweater, but thank you so much for the red sweater. Red is my favorite color.
Mhm.
And I feel so special when I'm wearing that red sweater. Then someone feels like there's more to it,
Yeah.
right? And that's a thank you note. But I think it really does take being really aware of what this is all about for you. And nonprofits have a particular need to be intentional about their expressions of gratitude.
Mhm.
um, and they can do it by giving plaques or whatever, but it doesn't matter unless it's coming from a place of sincere feeling of gratitude, which would be then the intention would be to express that feeling by doing something more than just saying the words.
Mm. And that's also super important if you've interviewed for a job, right?
Yes.
Because there's so many people that don't, first of all, don't say thank you for interviewing me at all.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones that just send the quick little email that's just like, hey, thanks, or whatever, right? But if you actually would write from a point where you're having the intention to connect with the people, use it as an opportunity to actually connect one more time. That's a
Absolutely.
whole different ball games, and it also makes you memorable
Yeah.
to the place you just interviewed.
Well, along those lines, Jill, I have worked with a lot of people who were either looking to transition to a new place in their work, or in a couple of cases where people lost their job, and I agreed to keep working with them through that transition. And what I think is so important is to get comfortable with story in that situation. The story with a capital S. How can I how can I relay to someone who I really am? How can I relay to them what matters to me? And it's hard to do when you've got a little space that you fill in online for an application, but it's not impossible to use story. And in that case, also to use stories, to tell stories about yourself. That again, connection. If you want to have impact, you need that connection with people. Connection or influence is not about force. It is not about standing up and standing correctly, even though I thought that was important as a performer. And I think it's important to how you stand, but still, it's not about that. Influence is about connecting with the people you're talking with.
I love that. If you had other advice for our listeners, what would it be?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand that you do have a voice. And we haven't talked about presence. Um,
Mhm.
Presence is the third leg of the intention story, and presence is all about a choice. Some people feel their presence, that I want to have a certain presence. I want to have executive presence, or I want to be charismatic or something. And presence is a choice. We all have presence, but what kind of presence do we have? So I would say my advice, if I were to give it, would be to start paying attention to how you show up, to be aware of how you show up, maybe get feedback from people, and then you'll know yourself better. You'll know yourself better. And to understand that it matters why you say what you say, how you say what you say, and what you say, that those things make a difference. The alignment of those three is probably the most important thing you could learn in order to have impact with others.
And there's so many different layers to presence too, right? It's not just like how we stand or how we sit. It's
No,
how we dress, how we put things together, right? How just there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
long list.
yeah, exactly. I do a little exercise with people called the statement of intention, and in that they think about what are their skills, what are the strongest aspects of themselves that they can bring to what they do, what do they want to be doing in their work or in their life, and how do they want to interact with people, and then what's their vision for their life, and all of those things put together become really their presence. And it's also their intention, which is where it all comes together, where when you start to look at what I have to offer to the world, how I want to interact with people, what I'm trying to accomplish, and put that all together, you have something that you can look at and let it guide you, and then make it aspirational, make it something that's bigger than you in the moment, and let that guide you. Then that's something pretty powerful.
And one of the things that we haven't talked about that I know that you're very involved with is you're part of a dialogue organization, right? That's trying to cross divisional lines and do a lot of peace work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
PEACE peace work.
Well, there's that. Yes.
Yeah,
Really, what we're trying to do is just get people talking to each other, and
yeah.
if that creates peace, that's great. And if it just creates better understanding, that's great too. It's Braver Angels, which is a national grassroots organization, and I'm a moderator and also a co-chair in an alliance for Braver Angels. It's yeoman's work, really, but it's. I've learned a lot, a tremendous amount. I feel like I'm much more open, more willing to hear others, and just in everyday conversation, you learn skills that help you. I started doing it because of the work that I do otherwise, and felt, well, if the country is going to fall apart, maybe I can help glue a little pieces together while it's falling, at least. But maybe I can help, and so that's why I do that.
So maybe it really is the other kind of peace work too. Then,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
yeah. And if people want to get involved with that, is it braverangels.org?
Braverangels.com or .org, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you mentioned that you're rolling out a new company. Does it have a website yet?
No, it doesn't. No,
Okay.
but
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 they
it
can
will. Yeah, and
still get a hold of you at Vocal Impact.
vocalimpact.com. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Any further words of wisdom?
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. It's always fun, and I appreciate your interest in my work very much.
Thank you. You've been doing amazing work, and
Thank you.
both you and your husband,
Thank you. Thank you.
in fundraising and in the work you're doing to help people communicate better.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And takes one to know one.